Just need to go to privacy settings, and in there, give Chrome access, and then you'll have to quit and come back in.
Okay, I'll play with that and maybe someone else can go so everyone isn't held up. If Kenny or Kyle, you want to go, and then I'll jump in.
All right, Kenny, okay. You want to go?
You want me to go? Okay, let me see if it only says entire screen. I might have the same problem.
You should be able to choose. Oh, you have the same problem? I can go.
Because I'm on Safari. Let me do this. I can do my entire screen. It'll just be annoying for a minute, and then I won't see you guys. And so let me get. Oh wait, how do I do it? Okay, let me. So I got a long doc, but I'm gonna go through quick. Okay, so if this gets, let me know if I fix it. Like I said, it'll be annoying for a second while you see bed knobs and broomsticks, kind of thing. I think it's gonna get terrible. And then let me find. Okay, do you see just preview? Okay, cool. Because I can't see anything. You guys could be flipping me off.
Yeah, no, we can see.
Cool. So I'll keep it in this, and I'll go quick. I'll totally stick to the 10 minutes. Basically, I'm going to talk about prompt crafting and bringing photographic words into the prompts that you use, and choosing which words that you run with, because and you'll see, like, I go through and I use Midjourney, and I see what people are using in their prompts, and I think sometimes people are using things that they don't understand and aren't doing anything. So that's what really this is about. And stop me again. I can't see anybody, so stop me if you want. If you have any questions, try to make this.
Quick question: Is this this is specifically prompt crafting on Midjourney?
I don't think so, because I've also tried everything I've done here, and it's not about necessarily crafting. It's about the words that you use. I've tried similar experiments on Stable Diffusion, and I get very similar results. So I think it's overall, but definitely test it. And I could be wrong on all this stuff. So that's a good thing to know.
I think that's the caveat we all have to say.
Yeah, and it could change. And what I did too on this is I used V4, but again, I've seen the same things that I've seen on the earlier versions, and like I said, I saw it on Stable Diffusion and even Starry Eye, because I have Starry Eye on my phone. So just about me really quick: I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I used to be a photographer, I talked about that, creative director, available if you need one, troublemaker, and world builder. And the world builder is that thing that Leah was talking about. I have this, I got into working with AI probably earlier than June, maybe April. I really started with Starry Eye on my phone. Then I moved to, like, what was it, Wombo or something like that, and then to Stable Diffusion. But I wasn't getting what I want. In July of this year, I got into Midjourney, and really I was about to stop because I wasn't getting anything I liked. And I randomly was like, I'll pay the $10 and just see if I like it, try a little bit more. And I randomly, I don't know if you can see my cursor, this guy in the upper right, I traded him. And I was like, this guy is cool, and he has a story that needs to be told. And so that night, like within an hour, I was already done with my fast time on Midjourney. I believe it was so quick. So, went up to $30. And I've been playing ever since. And this is my project, which is the Creatures of FPO on Instagram. And what it is if you all know Humans of New York, it's that, but in a world where everybody is a weird puppet-like creature. And so that's what this is. And I, said before, like, I'm a photographer by trade. And so this is just, it feels like the photos that I used to do. I did a lot of street stuff. So that's what this is all about. And the things that I've seen in here, and this is in creating these images is what got me thinking about crafting photographically. So just places you can find me. Creatures of FPO is my main account. I also have this travel.ai.ng. That I paused kind of, or I'm tweaking, because one of the things I talk about is the ethics of AI. And I found a lot of racism with the creation. And I found it in this travel thing because I'm trying to make little aliens in a human world. And everybody is white except for the alien. And, you know, as an alien, I think there's like an inherent bias there, maybe not racism, but bias. And I understand how it's created, but I think that Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and everything need to think about like how to add diversity in. So that's still around. It's kind of paused. And then FPO.ai is other things that aren't little creatures. And then if that's my personal, oh, sorry, I didn't know do anything. That's my website. This is my, I can't find it. This is my little thing. So, okay, but what I want to get into, I only have like 6 minutes. What I call prompt smashing. And I'm going to go really quick and I'm going to give you all the PDF and tell you, like, so you can understand things that you can add interest to, and really this is about adding interest to your prompts. But all of these images right here are in Midjourney, but it's, you know, Mario from Super Mario Brothers is Iron Man on the tiny planet in space --V4, right? And the quality of them are pretty good, and almost all this.
Just
yeah, sorry.
1 sec. So for the folks in the room, if you can't read what was written up there, when he says --V4, Midjourney just upgraded to version 4, and like the quality is dramatically higher. So that's when he says --V4, that's what that's about. Sorry,
yeah, and so it's not the default. Right now, the default is V3. So this looks very much like, and somebody was asking me if this is just about Midjourney. The reason I play Midjourney is I cannot create my guys I can't create my guys in V4. I can't create my guys on Stable Diffusion. It just doesn't work like that. So that's why I stick in Midjourney. But yes, and again, I tried the same stuff in Stable Diffusion and I got some very similar results.
Yep.
But the difference between
Allison has a question. Allie has a question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify the news update, which is that by default now, Midjourney uses V4. That just happened like last night, I believe. So if you liked V3 better, you need to do the --V3. Just wanted to like clarify so everyone knows where we're at. V4 is
cool.
By default.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Okay, great.
And in my settings, it says V3. So yeah. So the difference between, so all these images look really good and really much the same. This is the different prompts that I have in each one of these. The first one on the left was just what I said. The second one was a mistake because I didn't copy this whole huge crazy prompt that somebody else made on something that I saw was beautiful. And the one on the right is that insanely, and I'll blow it up so you can see them, is a lot of words. And I think the TLDR, the too long didn't read, is the lot of words don't really do anything, in my opinion. And this is, again, across from others. And I'll talk about that a little bit. Tried it again with something else. Oh, shoot. This is not Super Mario. This is like Deep Sea Diver. Future, it says in the next one. Something happened. Futuristic Deep Sea Diver. Yeah, that's what it is. So they're all the same prompt here. I'll finish this before I give people the PDF. And these are all the same, but again, the one with just the V4, the one with the little bit of stuff, the other one, I actually think the one in the middle looks more photographic than the one on the right.
Yeah.
So, you know, what are people doing, right? So this is, again, I found this what I call prompt smashing from somebody, and their image they created was absolutely beautiful. But if you look in here, I don't know if you can see my cursor. I think you probably can. You know, it says half rear lighting, backlight, natural lighting, soft lighting, studio lighting, cinematic lighting, soft lighting, beautiful lighting, accent lighting. Like, they're putting so many things in there that don't necessarily make sense and counteract each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And my gut is no AI was ever trained on this. This is stuff that you know because you're a photographer. You knew that it was backlight. I don't think people are going in there and writing backlight. I mean, when you think about where the info is coming, it's coming from metadata. It's coming from things you put on Flickr. It's coming from things in stock photos. I don't think half this stuff it knows. And that's what this is a little bit about. So I'll go quick. But what I did is I did a little bit of a test. Portrait of a man walking down a street. Aspect ratio is 3:2. You could put that in on Midjourney. I forget how you do it on. There's a different way to do it on Stable Diffusion because I forget what I use. Dream something. Seed. What I did is I found the same seed image. So there's almost the same kind of look and feel each time, and then V4, right? So this is just basic. It looks a little painterly. So I added DSLR there, and you're starting to see that starts to do something. That is actually doing something. DSLR for digital, you know, SLR, that starts adding stuff in there. I will say I didn't do this test with adding the words photography, photographic, photorealistic, but once you start adding those things, it feels more like a photo, if you want things to look like a photo. But then I wanted to try, like, what does it look like if I start putting apertures in there? A lot of people put apertures in, f1.8. And even if you go to the Midjourney thing, and again, I don't know how it's stable, if they have a PDF, but Stable Diffusion, you know, put f1.8 in there. And this is how Midjourney says to do it, is f/1.8, which is the photographic term. It doesn't, it looks good, right? That's an f8, if y'all haven't done photography, is a shallow depth of field. Would be more shallow than what you're seeing, but you're going to have a lot of out of focus areas, and you know, the thing you want is going to be nice and crisp. And you see the one on the right is maybe a little bit more out of shallow depth of field, and that's because I used the word shallow depth of field, right? So it understands both those words, you'd think, right? So then I tried f22, and f22 is super long depth of field. Everything should be in focus. It's kind of that infinity thing. And I also did deep depth of field, and I did infinity depth of field. I also tried long depth of field, but you can see the depth of field on these images are all the same. Whether I put, maybe shallow depth of fields give me a little bit more shallow, but these are all the same. It's very much, I don't think aperture or depth of field does anything on Midjourney, and I didn't see much difference on the Stable Diffusion that I did. So that's one thing to think about. Absolutely add them to your prompts if you want. If I do with my guys, I'm not going to take them out because I'm superstitious. Actually, that little yarn guy, I have to add words of something that I wanted him to do in the image to be holding. I have to add that to my prompt, because if I don't add that word, I can't get that race. I call them races. That race of people with that nice long hair, and it doesn't show up anywhere in the image. What I'm saying is, you know, like a baseball player wears the same socks every game. I put things in my prompts that I know don't do anything, but I need them there, right? Another thing I think does not work, and maybe this works better on Stable Diffusion. This is the one I didn't try because I was trying this last night on Stable Diffusion, is shutter speed. Doesn't work. These are all waterfalls, stop action, fast shutter speed, you know, slow shutter speed, which is the one on the bottom right. That is actually a slow shutter speed. Yeah. But you know, this shutter speed of 1/1000th, it's all the same. What a fast shutter speed or a shutter speed of 1/1000 is supposed to do is like stop the motion of the water, so you know, you get those beautiful droplets. So I don't think it does anything. Again, play around with it, add it. I don't think it does anything. But like, I don't want to be a downer on this. I think I have 3 minutes, or maybe I went over. Sorry. Things that do work. Processing works. So if you all are photographic, you might have heard of like lith prints, which is the upper left. It's this very beautiful. It's got a little bit of a brown to it, and it's got high contrast. That works because it knows what a lith print is. Yeah. I think it's weird that it doesn't know what a fast shutter speed or a shutter speed of 1/1000th is because I thought it was reading metadata. Maybe it's not reading metadata. Yeah. Another thing is, like, if you guys want to try, I think this is fun to try, like add red scale, which is the upper right, which is, you used to put your film in backwards. Cross processing, you might have heard of that. Like, this adds this like nice green, some flares and stuff like that. That's really fun. So you can add these things in if you want to adjust your image and make it cool. And I think those kind of things work better than some of the stuff you saw before. It is different. Doesn't work with depth of field. Doesn't work with whatever. But I thought it was cool. Other things that I think are really cool is qualities of light. Adding light leaks, you know, to think about it. And again, this is photographic, but it doesn't need to be a photo. You can add all this stuff in there to get the color you want or whatever. Light flares really work well if you want to do a J.J. Abrams thing. That said, all qualities of light don't work. Like, I tried, again, if you know photography, flat lighting, you don't get a lot of shadows with flat lighting. You think about it like a day where there's tons of clouds. that would be very flat lighting. You don't get a lot of shadows, and here you're getting, this is not flat light.
Yeah.
Harsh light isn't harsh light. Maybe this guy a little bit, but it's no different here. I love this soft lighting. I love this image. It's beautiful. I might use soft lighting in my prompt. I don't think it would do anything. High contrast lighting. I don't think high contrast lighting is doing anything. I think the word high contrast is doing something. Also, fun things to play with is cameras. Cameras work. Like I said before, SLR, add that. If you want something photo quality, add SLR to it, which is film. DSLR. Types of cameras. If y'all, again, if you know photography, or just pop it in there. Holga cameras were these plastic cameras. It should be a square image.
Yeah,
these plastic cameras that were like, the edges would be out of focus and things like that, and had a little bit of a fisheye. That's kind of a cool effect. I did Hasselblad. I don't think it does anything necessarily. It's just a really nice image. So again, with my superstition, I might use that again. Lomography. It's not a camera necessarily. Lomo made cameras, but what it does is it adds, if you pop that in there, it'll add contrast and some really nice bright images that are not cross processed, but look good. I don't know why I have DSLR here. Polaroid works really cool. Polaroid is awesome. It adds the frame. It makes it look a little bit older. One of the things you'll notice is, like, because these are Polaroids, the people actually look like they're 70s, 80s, in the 70s or 80s. And that's because that's what it was pulling up. And another thing to think about when you're crafting is, like, angles work really well. So I tried this I put in last minute. Low angle was like man sitting in a bus stop. Low angle, so his little camera's low. High angle, he's a little bit higher, and then overhead. Like, I think that kind of thing works really well. So, like, as you're crafting, adding those things will help you figure out where the camera is. And again, it doesn't need to be photographic. It could be like, I want to build a beautiful dragon in, a fantasy world, but like from overhead or like low or whatever. So the point of this, quick, is, just play, experiment, have fun. Like, I'm sure these things are going to change as the machines learn more. And this is just a sample I did. I will say that, like, I have hundreds more images of all of these things. So I didn't just do one off. I found the results were the same over and over and over. And I did try stable diffusion. Not as much because I don't have as many credits. Yeah, so play. And another thing too is, like, just as an example, I did this late too. I did this platinum chrome cube, it's interactive. It looks really nice. But when you start adding some things in there, like I added Octane Render, which is like a CGI render, highlight, shadows, intricate details. I find UHD does some really good stuff. I'm not sure about Cinema 4D. That's a render thing too, I think. But, like, if you start adding, like, highlight, shadows, ultra high def, then it looks a little bit more photographic, and you get these little cool things. So definitely add the stuff in there. It's just, like, play around and see what works for the images you need. So that's my thing.
Perfect. Awesome.
So I didn't take too much time or bore people.
No, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Anybody have any quick questions or comments?
Yeah, I wrote down quite a few questions, actually. I guess I'll just make a comment about what you started out with the racism and AI. I found it an interesting comment as a person of color, I guess, because I've had to experiment around with it a little bit, and I don't use Midjourney. I typically stick with Stable Diffusion, and with Stable Diffusion, I have to very specifically say, dark skin, dark tone. Right. Things like that. And so I just wanted to make a comment that I found that very interesting. Yeah. Another comment I wanted to make was I thought that
wait, can I hop in? Can I hop in with that just because you mentioned it? I have to do the same thing, and I tried people. I think there's a problem with that though, because then it's saying, if I say a person walking down the street, I'm gonna get a white person, right? Mm-hmm. Then I say a black person walking down the street, I'm gonna get a black person. But now I've quantified, I don't want a person walking down the street. I want a black person down the street. And I think that's, I think that's dangerous, because it's saying that this is not this. You know what I mean? You have to do it. Like you said, to craft what you want, you have to add that adjective on there. And yes, we are sometimes going to want specific people. But when you just want like people in general hanging out at lunch, you don't want them all white. You have to put like those quantifiers in there. And I think it only messes with the data. Does that make sense? Like, I think it makes the data more and more racist or biased. I don't know if that makes sense.
And it's really funny you mentioned that, because bias in AI, and especially in art generation, is a kind of a big topic right now. And I think it'll get better as, you know, the technology evolves. But at the moment, it's something that we're dealing with for sure. Another comment that I just wanted to make was, you mentioned kind of having trouble getting consistent generations of subjects. And it's something I also experience with Stable Diffusion, especially with creating people and faces. It has a very tough time doing that. Just a comment I wanted to make. And then I guess I was kind of curious. I don't know if this is something that you've experienced or experimented with at all, but I'm kind of curious how the AI uses artist names in the prompts and how that influences what it generates, like Greg Rutkowski. What does it know about Greg Rutkowski, and what does it, you know, how does that influence the generated art piece, I guess?
I think it knows them absolutely. So I did another thing. I'll look for it on LinkedIn while we're talking, where I talked about IP and artists. And I think we're going to get to a point where IP owners, Disney, and artists, Shepard Fairey, say, ban my name. And I don't know if it's going to happen, right? But you know, I think we're going to have some court case, because I can learn how to draw like Greg Rutkowski. I can't forget his name, like that Greg dude, right? I can learn how to do that. If I put his name in there, I think it's fun. It's super fun to do, and you get cool stuff, but I haven't learned that. I can probably learn to prompt without his name and get the same style, which is the same as me learning how to draw like him. And I think, you know, and I've tried that with Shepard Fairey, because I think it's an easier style to accomplish. And I'm trying to like, hey, if I want to do this without him, you can do it. So I think, but I you know, I think we're going to see a court case in the next year. And I don't know how it's going to end.
Yeah, I think we're going to see hundreds. I think there's also a future where artists will own their own models, and you can use the officially sanctioned Disney model or Greg Rutkowski model. So I think that'll all happen. I know there was another question. Someone else had a question. Then we need to move on, just because we're tight on time.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Have you all noticed that it seems to be a little biased towards thin fit people too? And you don't really get a variety of like body sizes.
Yeah. The question, could you all hear the question? Yeah.
I think that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
As it keeps kind of like promoting this like sort of superhero person that may or may not be real. We're getting kind of further away from generating real things and more into like this idealism of like, you know, the perfect white guy, or like the perfect whatever.
Yeah, I think Lensa, the consumer apps like Lensa, I think the prompts that they wrote are purposely making people look better. Having dream boothed myself and doing it in Stable Diffusion, the AI is not kind. It thinks I'm 450 pounds regularly. So I think it strongly depends on the prompt. Sometimes I'll put a prompt in there and I just look like a movie star. And then other times, even if I put thin, handsome Kyle Shannon, I get fat, blobby Kyle Shannon because of whatever scene it's in. So yeah.
Is there a way to use AI to reverse engineer? Say you take a picture and you say, what kind of prompt would generate this?
Yeah, and in fact, Leah, when Leah shows her work, she's doing some of that, so she can talk to that quite directly. Kenny, that's awesome, great. So you're gonna put that PDF. Just send it to me, or you can ping it in the.
I can drop it in here and then send it to you. I just fixed the typo.
Okay, perfect. But thank you very much. Let's maybe we'll start a tradition, a little golf claps for Kenny.
Yeah.
Round of applause. Okay. So I'm going to geek out now. I'm going to show you how to install a thing called Automatic 1111. I was going to start with showing you the interface and what it does, but the virtual machine timed out, so it doesn't work right now. So I'm going to start with, oops, my keynote quit on me. Please. I'm going to start with some high-level stuff. So what I'm about to show you. Let's see. Hang on a second. You can all see this. So installing Automatic 1111, it's really simple. It's not. So I'm going to walk you through first just the high-level concept. What I want you to sort of take out of this is not the specific thing, the specific installation I'm going to show you, because this is the first installation of about 12 that I tried that actually worked. So I had 12 failures first, and I had no idea what these tools even were. So there's all sorts of terminology and language that gets thrown around that is spoken as if you should understand what the hell it means. And it's hard. So a couple of things. There's a couple of different ways that you can access AI tools. There's web-based tools. Like there's one called getimage.ai. There's another one called Dream Studio that's part of Stability. Basically, you just go to that URL and you can start making images. Some of them are free. Some of them give you free images for a while, then you have to pay later. There's pros and cons in here. The PDF will be in there. You can read the pros and cons. But basically, you don't have to install anything. The cons are you're sort of contributing to someone else's image library, and your stuff is kind of out there for everyone to see. You can also run it locally, right? So you can run it on your machine. Like if you have an M1 Mac, you can run this thing called Diffusion B, which is a stable diffusion thing that you're running locally. The advantage of that is you're running everything locally. It's nice and private. The disadvantage is unless you've got a screaming GPU or series of GPUs, it's really slow. So doing a Diffusion B image on this M1 Mac takes about 60 seconds, where if I do it on a GPU in the cloud, it takes 5. You can also do the paid apps like Lensa. The things there is that they make it super, super easy. It's like download the app, upload your pictures, pay us $3.99, and we'll give you 50 images of you as a superhero, right? The problem is you get almost no creative control. That'll change, but that's another way to do it. And then the third way is to run these applications on virtual machines. Because this is all new technology and it's all coming out, this is a way that you can basically run these applications in the cloud on, Amazon's or, Microsoft's or someone else's massive computers with their massive GPUs. So that's what I'm going to show you how to install. Before I go into the how do you install this thing, I want to give you sort of broad categories of the pieces of the puzzle that you need to get your head around. So the thing I'm going to show you is called Automatic 1111. That's a graphical user interface for Stable Diffusion. So you can generate these images either in a Discord server or in a terminal, right, where it's all code. Or you can put a fancy, UX in front of it so people can just click on stuff. That's what this is. Some things you should know. Reddit, if you're not on there, the subreddits for like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, like these are people just totally geeking out on that particular tool. So go there. That's where you can learn about these tools. The other remarkable thing about Reddit and these communities is the minute Stable Diffusion puts out a new model, the developers pounce on it and they release new versions of the scripts that I'm about to show you. So like it happens every other day. The script that worked yesterday doesn't work today because they updated it. Google Drive. It's basically just a virtual hard drive. It's where you store stuff. If you don't have an account, get one. If you want to do this. And by the way, if you haven't tried any of this, you can just take a nap right now. But if you kind of want to geek out and have a lot of control over your stuff, that's what this is about. This one's really interesting. There's this thing called Google Colaboratory. It's basically a giant pile of virtual machines on Google that runs these things called notebooks. And notebooks are basically just a series of installation scripts all in a row that someone else has coded and then put in what this thing they call a notebook with a bunch of play buttons. And so basically you just go here, you hit these play buttons that runs these scripts and installs this software so you can play with it. GitHub is where you get a lot of this stuff, get these notebooks. GitHub is just a giant code repository. And then the final thing, if you're going to do Dream Booth, which is you want to upload your own images to make your own things, you'll keep seeing this thing about what's your Hugging Face key. I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. What's my Hugging Face key? I don't like, is it, do you hug someone? Like, no, Hugging Face is where when you hear things like the Stable Diffusion 1.5 model, that lives on Hugging Face. So Hugging Face is just a giant library of these models. So I'd strongly recommend, if you want to install things on a virtual machine, sort of get familiar with these basic concepts and these basic tools. Set up accounts on all these. Find an automatic 1111 Colab notebook, which I'm going to show you how to do, the one that I know that works for me. And what you're going to do is you're going to copy that to your Google Drive. You're going to run the notebook, which I'll show you, and then you're going to launch automatic 1111. This sounds like a nightmare because it is. Okay, moving on. So I'll make that available. Okay, so now, here's Reddit, and is that Stable Diffusion? No, here's Stable Diffusion. So again, like, yeah, the first post here, automatic 1111 now has a Windows launcher, easy installer and cool launcher. It is probably not easy and it probably isn't all that cool, but it might be. But this is where you can find a bunch of this stuff. Okay, so here's my Google Drive, and within my Google Drive, these are these things called Colab notebooks. The little thing at the end is IPYNB. I don't quite know what that stands for. NB probably stands for notebook. And if I go out a level, this is basically just a hard drive with folders on it. In there's a folder called Colab notebooks. And so where did I get that? I got that on GitHub. The place that I go is this guy named The Last Ben. So github.com/thelastben. He has written this thing called Fast Stable Diffusion. Within here are two files, the Fast Dream Booth IPYNB and the Fast Stable Diffusion Automatic 1111. The Dream Booth is the one, if you want to train it to know who you are, you can install that one. The Fast Stable Diffusion Automatic 1111 is the one that if you've got a model already, or you just want to use the normal one, this is the fancy front end. So here's how the thing kind of works. If I'm starting from scratch, I copy the URL for the thing I want to install. So this is the Fast Stable Diffusion Automatic 1111. So here's the code of the notebook. So this guy, Ben, has written all this code that's going to install all these different libraries that make this stuff work. So then I go to Google Colab, and when you first start up your account, it just kind of looks like a web page. But you'll notice over here, there's a little button that says connect. And if I say connect, it's saying allocating, connecting, initializing. And now it says, here's how much RAM you have and here's how much hard drive you have. So what we're actually looking at here, this is a fake computer up in the sky. And if I look over here, here's all the directory of, that you would see if you were on kind of the root drive of a Windows machine. Now, how do I get Ben's notebook to run in here? Well, I go to File, Open Notebook. I can pull things off of my Google hard drive if they're on there, but if you're doing this for the first time, you can click on the GitHub tab, and now I can just paste in that URL for the Last Ben Stable Diffusion, and it finds both, here's the Dream Booth one, here's the Automatic 1111 one, so I click that, and now what you see here is this is a notebook, and again, this took me ages, so in these notebooks are what are called cells. So each one of these little lines here with the play button is a cell. So you basically play these things in order, and it's going to load this machine that you can go play with. Okay. The thing that I just launched is is the GitHub the code from the GitHub repository. So this is going to be read only. So if I change anything in here, when I close this, it's all going to go away. So the first thing that you want to do once you open this for the first time, there's a little button here that says copy to drive. So if I say copy to drive, that's going to copy that to my Google Drive. And now I'll be running a copy of his thing, and I can modify it, and it'll keep my preferences and things like that. Okay, so let me go turn this on. Let's see. So I'm going to scroll to the top. Okay, so again, this is the Fast Stable Diffusion tool from the last Ben. The first thing I'm going to do is mount my Google Drive. So I hit the play button. It's going to ask me, is it okay to mount your Google Drive? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say allow. And so now what it's doing is it's basically giving this virtual computer access to my Google Drive, right? So it's going to, now when I save files, it's going to save it to my drive, not save it to someone else's, drive up in the cloud. So that little wheel will spin until it doesn't. And you'll get a little green check mark that says it's done. And then the next thing you do is install the automatic 1111 repo. And I've got a little box checked here that says update repo. This is basically saying, let me go check back with GitHub and see if there's any new additional code or new libraries that are required. So I just hit play here. Why this took me a dozen attempts to do this is because I didn't know any of these concepts or what this meant. And I would hit one of these play buttons and it would give me an error and I wouldn't know what to do. So I would just quit. And then the next night I would try another one and it would just fail. And then I eventually hit one that worked. So this is now, you see, there's this little blinking dot down here. It's probably at some point going to tell us, all right, it's already up to date. I got a little green check mark. Now I can go and download the model. So yes.
Don't you need your token in there, or does it have a default one?
Where the token, yeah. So the first time I run this, if I haven't downloaded the Stable Diffusion model from Hugging Face, it will say you've got to put in your token from Hugging Face. So when you go to Hugging Face, you create an account here, and then in your account, if you go to settings and say access tokens, there's your access token. So basically you just copy this and paste it into that model that you're running through, or the thing that you're running through. Now that I've downloaded it to my hard drive, I don't need to do that. So it's just looking for a directory here. So I'm going to say download the model. Since I've already downloaded it, it's just going to really quickly say using the trained model. So I've got the model that I trained with my images in there already. So it knows that. And now I'm going to say load the requirements. All of these steps that I'm doing, once you get one of these notebooks that works, to get this thing running, you need to run through this each time. But then once it's running, you're off to the races. So it's doing some. So it's loading these little dependencies. You see these things over on the left. I know this is terribly dry, but this will be recorded so you can go back and watch it. But the big thing that I had to get in my head, Google Colab are these virtual machines where you can basically rent a really powerful machine. The notebooks are someone else wrote the installation scripts to install it in that virtual machine. And once you get one of these things working, then you can go play. Okay, so the requirements are all downloaded and done. And now I say start Stable Diffusion. And so it's going to go look at all those dependencies that were just loaded in there. It's going to look at things like, let me see, within Google Drive, this is my drive. In here's a little folder called SD for Stable Diffusion. And here's a folder called Stable Diffusion Weights. That's where I put my models. So you see one here says Kyle Shannon. So it's kind of loading all of this stuff in. You see there's a little blinking cursor here. The wheel's still spinning. So it's basically loading all of this stuff into this virtual computer's memory. And then as soon as this loads, I'll show you how to run the tool. That's actually decently easy to use, but still really complicated. I think one of the bigger things to recognize here is we're still very, very early in this industry, right? The AI world has been going, since, I don't know, 2010 or something like that. Like, it's been there for a while, but it's really been the purview of like big data scientists and, science geeks. Now, all of a sudden, there's all these tools where we can do this creative stuff, but you still have to geek out a little bit. This will get increasingly easier as these tools develop, but if you wait until that, then you'll be behind the curve, right? Because it is worth putting in the effort because the results are so good. This is still going, so I had this running before, but it timed out. And
so with this, we can create like incredibly customized graphics or customized visuals that based on what we type in. So, right?
So Stable Diffusion is the model that I'll be using, the image generation model. This thing that I'm launching right now is this visual front end on top of that lets you like slide sliders, and you put in your prompt and it generates an image. And we just have to wait for this thing to do its thing. So it takes a while to launch, but once it launches, then you just go play. Any other questions while this thing's loading? And I know this is not very interesting to do, but hopefully you get the basic concepts here. And
it's super helpful. Thanks for walking through it. I honestly can't keep up with it as you're doing it, but the fact that it's recorded and I can go back and do it later is really helpful. So thank you for taking the time to walk through it. Yeah,
I know. I like, this is one of those things of like we've got to show this, but yeah, it is mind numbing, and figuring it out on your own. That's the other thing about, please join the Discord, because as you're trying to do this and slamming your head against the wall, like, I sort of just had to let a month and a half go by while I was figuring this stuff out. If I had a community that I could jump in and ask dumb questions about, like, what's a notebook? What's Google Colab? Like, someone explained it to me like I'm 5. Now we've got ChatGPT that can. But now you'll notice it says latent diffusion.
One quick thing, Kyle. I just also wanted to say, if there's anyone else that's feeling like overwhelmed by this, if you're like new to the world of AI, I just know that not everyone might be on exactly the same page. If you join our Discord, there's also definitely simpler tools that are a little bit easier to like jump in and play with. Don't feel like this whole process is the barrier to entry to like start playing with stuff.
Yep. That's a really good point. The agenda from the first meeting, there are lots of tools in there. You can just go click on and start playing.
They're on the Discord. They're all organized on the Discord as well now in that directory.
Right. Yep.
And I may have missed it, Kyle. Did you say this was a free option, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Google Colab is free, and you can gain access to their GPUs. So you need their GPUs to run Stable Diffusion. They only give you a certain amount of credits, and then they deprioritize your jobs, basically. So you can pay for the pro version. So the pro version is $10 a month, and they give you 100 credits. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, I blew through 100 credits in about 5 days. But then what I realized is I'm like, oh no, I got to like re-up my thing. And what I realized was it will still run your job. It just basically says your jobs are of a lower priority. So it may take your stuff longer to render if you haven't paid, but it's actually a free thing. So you can set this up all free. Okay, so now I know that was super exciting waiting for all that, but it told us what it did. It said it was loading the weights, which are the different models. It was applying transformers, model loaded, and now it says running on local URL. So it will generate this local URL. So this is automatic 1111. So all of that was to get to this page where we say click to continue. And now this is automatic 1111. So this is the interface. Again, we're still early in this industry. Automatic 1111 is a nice front end in front of literally hundreds of different options and little switches you can flip. I basically have learned 3 parameters. I don't mess with anything other than these 3. So what we're looking at here, this first text box is where you put your prompt. The next text box is where you put your negative prompt. This is things I don't want this image to be. Then there's this thing called sampling steps. I set that to 50 because that's basically the number of cycles it does, where it goes from raw noise to a finished image. You can set that higher, but it takes longer. All of these little checkboxes here are all sorts of different methodologies for how it interprets your stuff. I just leave that on the default. Then it's got the dimensions of the image. So I set this to like 704 by 512, which makes it a portrait image. And then the only other thing I play with is the CFG scale, which defaults to 7. Basically, if you go to 20, that tries to make what you typed in exactly. If you go to 0, it'll have almost nothing to do with what you typed in. So 7 is a nice creative kind of thing. So then what I do is this. Because I'm so exhausted having gotten here, I don't have any ideas about what image I should do. So I go to this site called Lexica, which is a bunch of images that are generated with Stable Diffusion. So you can just go find anything in here that looks interesting to you. So I'll put in cyborg. So that's going to find me a bunch of cyborg. Okay, this skinny dude here with the stuff on his face looks kind of cool. If I click on the image, here's the prompt that made that up. And I can see here's a bunch of other images made with this exact prompt. So now I'm going to copy this prompt. I hop back over to Stable Diffusion. I paste it in. I change this as a whirlwind inside. It says guy, male, man. So I'm going to replace guy with Kyle Shannon, which is because I'm using the model that I created that understands who I am. It now understands who I am. So I say generate. And so now this is generating. You'll see a little progress bar at the top of this window. But also if I go back to the virtual machine, you can actually see the commands that it's sending to the machine. So these are the different cycles. I told it to do 50 cycles. Here it's doing 1 of 50, 2 of 50, 3 of 50. So it's generating this image off in the background. And then I come back here and I've gotten to 98%, and we'll see how it did. And there I am, looking, my hair is almost as nice as my hat right there. But there's almost no cyborg stuff there. So then I'll just mess with the CFG scale and change that up and hit generate. And now it'll make another one. And so this is what I do. And when I find an image I like, I drag that into my Apple Photos library. Last thing I'll say, and then I'm going to turn it over to Leah, is the one thing that confused the crap out of me is where do these images go, right? So I'm like, oh, that one's cool, but wait, that one that I had before, I wanted to get that. All of this stuff is being saved. It's all still there in my hard drive, in my Google Drive. So if I go into Google Drive, and I go into the Stable Diffusion folder, so this has all been created. When you install all this stuff, all these directories are created. Then I go into Stable Diffusion, and I go into Outputs. You'll see text to image images and image to image images. Every image that I've ever created is in here. And it's taken a while for it to open up. But I can go back in here. So anything I've done, even when you leave this thing and come back to it, it's all still in here. So that's it. I know it was geeky. I know this was painful. I know most of you are probably asleep by now. Any questions? I want to turn it over to Leah so she can show you some cool work. Questions, thoughts?
Kyle,
Yeah.
can you cover the extensions tab for everyone? Because that's one of my favorite things about Automatic 1111 and where you get Dream Booth.
Yep. So all these different tabs are different things you can do. The extensions thing, if you say what's available and say load from, here are all sorts of different extensions. And again, you'll see in the Reddit, in the subreddit, people will talk about these extensions. Oh, there's this really cool extension that does this, or Dream Booth, as HT said. So basically, you just find an extension that you want, and you just hit install, and that's now installed on your Google Drive. So the next time you run Automatic 1111, that extension will be installed. So you're not just doing it in this one instance where you're running it temporarily. It's being written, all these files are being written into your drive. So, shoo.
Is the biggest reason you use this versus like a Dream Studio or like Hugging Face, is it because you want to train it on yourself?
Well,
Like,
well, no. Well, the reason is I don't want to be like Mid-Journey. Everything that you're typing in is basically being done in front of the community. Like Leah, the work she's going to show, she doesn't necessarily want to be experimenting out in public. She wants to do it privately. So for me, this is about, I need a fast GPU to run this. So it's gaining access to the fast GPUs, but it's also sort of having my own bucket that I can play in where I'm not sort of playing in public. That's what
I paid
it is
the 20, so I don't, for that reason, I paid 20 extra bucks, so I don't.
I want to I'll jump into the reason I've been playing with so I spent all day Saturday trying to get this set up and running. And what I'm trying to do, which I can't do in Dream Studio, I'll show you work I'm doing in Dream Studio. I can't use my own training data on the images I'm making. So I'm trying to get to a point where I can make training data where I could put any photo of mine in or put any idea in, and it would make a photo that looks like mine because it's trained on my photographs. This is a very nerdy thing to do, and it's really hard to do, but I think I can get much closer with that using what Kyle just said. In theory, we'll see.
Yeah, and
I have to get it to work first.
Yeah, the other thing that we can do in the Discord, and Leah and I talked about this yesterday as well, within Discord, you can do a room where people can hear you and talk, and someone can share their screen. So we could set up like a 2-hour session where everyone who wants to install this just logs in at the same time, and I'll walk through it, or anyone who's done it can walk through it, and you can be installing it in real time and asking questions. That might be something where we can all get up to speed more quickly. So that's why to do get on the Discord. Roger has a question. Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, I'm a little puzzled to hear people talk about using their own training data, because when I think about AI training, I think about volumes of training data that none of you could possibly have, even orders of magnitude close to the volumes of data that are being used. So how could you be training a model on the amount of stuff you have without it being so overfit to that data that it would be useless?
So you're not training your own model. What you're effectively doing is augmenting an existing model. So when you run this thing called Dream Booth, the first thing you do is you download Stable Diffusion 1.5 or 2.0 or 2.1. You download the Stable Diffusion model, which is the one that's been trained on billions of images or millions, whatever it is. Then when you upload your 20 photos or your 30 photos, you're basically training the existing model on those new photos on top of all that other data.
So is this sort of like transfer learning, where you basically have your generic image model, and then you're saying, I want to tweak it for my specific purpose, so you give it just a little bit more training data?
Yes. And in fact, one of the things that you'll see if you play around in that subreddit is people will say, oh, I just did a model on all these Marvel characters, or I just did a model on this super cool glass box sort of thing. And you can go to Hugging Face and you can download those models. And all of them are these augmented models where it's got the core Stable Diffusion model underneath it, but it's got some other groovy thing on top. And it'll generate very specific kind of images if you use the term that they put in there for their piece of the model, basically.
I see. All right, thank you.
Yep. All right. Leah, let's
All
see
right,
some work.
I'm going to see if I can get this. I sort of hacked around. I'll see if I can get this. I couldn't get the permission set.
Did you quit Chrome and restart?
No, I didn't know what to even go to system preferences, and it wouldn't. I didn't.
Go to privacy, privacy and security and privacy. Then go to the privacy tab in there.
Okay, wait. System preferences, security and privacy. Okay, wait. Oh, wait. Hold on. Security and privacy. Yep.
Got it? Then go to the privacy tab. Then scroll down to screen recording.
Yep.
And then unlock your little lock with your computer password.
Yep.
And then put a checkbox by Google Chrome. and then close that box, quit Chrome, and restart.
Put a checkbox.
By Google Chrome.
Google Chrome isn't there.
So say add.
Yeah.
Are you in? You're in screen recording. You're in the screen recording thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So click the plus button.
Yep.
And then find Google Chrome. And then it'll add it. And then once it's added, then you just quit and start again.
Okay. I'll see you in a sec.
Yep. Any other geeky questions before we?
Assuming that she's using Chrome, right, as a browser.
Yeah, but I think she was. I assume she was. Yeah. Just generally with Google stuff, Safari doesn't work as well because they're at war with Apple.
Oh, I don't use Safari.
Yeah. So
unless I'm testing.
Yeah. Yeah. Our account manager insists on using Safari, and she's like, "This doesn't work." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." That's the way Apple wants it.
I used to have Google as a client, and all my clients had iPhones, and I just thought that was funny. Like none of them had a Pixel phone.
Yeah,
I'm sure people on Pixel did. YouTube was my client, so.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Earlier, someone was talking about transfer learning. I'm a little curious about that subject. Instead of using predefined models to generate a specific image, I'm wondering if that's the same thing as if you upload an image to start with and want to alter that specific image in a way using the AI prompts. Is that the same thing?
No, it's a different thing.
Well, I'm curious about that specific thing I was talking about and if anybody has experience with it, because I'm having trouble with it. But Leah's back, so we could discuss that later.
Oh, you're muted, Leah.
So can you build in like a specific theme? Like, again, here with Brandon with like the ski industry. Like if you wanted a ski motif or snow, mountain.
That's just all in the prompting.
Adrenaline.
Yeah. So you can just say, I want a photograph of skiers blasting down a mountain, and then you can add all these modifiers to the end, whether you want it photographic or high angle, low angle, like Kenny was talking about.
Could you specify even like specific ski resorts or things like that might be able to,
if it knows it, potentially.
If it might pull in Breckenridge or something like that.
Potentially. Leah, did you get it working?
Okay, let's see. Do you see my screen? Okay,
yep.
Awesome.
Yay.
Okay, so hi, I'm Leah. And just quick about me, I know we don't have a ton of time and I really want to get to the work I'm doing. I've been a commercial photographer. I've been a photographer for over 20 years, and I have evolved from a photographer as a photojournalist into sort of a magazine photographer into commercial library work. And I have lived through all kinds of technical transitions. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Here's the vision statement for my branding. I work with brilliant commercial, editorial, and creative teams to bring light and connection, uninterrupted inspiration to all kinds of creative projects. And I am going to put this in the Google Drive so you can read more about where I'm at right now and go to my website and see how I approach creative work. I love what I do. I have incredible clients, and we make really good work together. What I want to talk about is how right now I feel like things feel very familiar to when we were transitioning from film to digital. I want to talk a little bit about that, and then how that's kind of inspired the project I'm working on with the real women of machine learning, or the women of machine learning. So I initially started shooting medium format film using a Mamiya and a Hasselblad. And here's an example of a contact sheet from my Mamiya 7 for work, for clients. And here's just a quick timeline. In 2000, I started using a digital camera when I was at newspapers with 12-bit chips, lacked range in highlights and shadows, but it worked for newspapers, printing at 150 DPI. When I started switching over to magazine work, I was shooting mostly color negative film with a Hasselblad or Mamiya 7, scanning the negatives and using an Imicon scanner to get the best dynamic range of those negatives. And then I also used a point and shoot camera for fun. Around 2004, 2005, there was a V96 CBAC, which was announced for Hasselblad, which was a 16-bit chip, which gave the most dynamic range of a digital chip yet. It only went to an ISO of 400, so it was very slow. And this is all very, very deep photography stuff, so bear with me. But one of the things that was really important making the transition from digital film was that I made filters in Photoshop by making pictures, making prints with my film process, and then taking photos of those with my digital camera and making filters in Photoshop that I could very quickly apply to my digital files. So you couldn't really tell a big difference between which files were film, which files were digital. This was a really important piece for me in making the switch. And so here's 6 images, a mix of film and digital that I shot during that time that I think feel very similar because of that process. And I think that's really important to what's happening now. About a month ago, I wanted to find out if I take a studio portrait that I made with digital, what could I do with it using Dream Studio? Dream Studio is it runs on top of Stable Diffusion. And it's a very simple interface. It's very easy to get up and running. You don't need to install this and install that. You don't need a GitHub account or anything. You can just sign on. It's like $10 for 1,000 credits. I don't know how they calculate it. I've made one payment of $10 so far, and I've used it a lot. So this is the portrait I started with. I shot it about 6 years ago in the studio with a model. I think we had available light coming in from a north-facing window, and I think 2 or 3 strobes. It's a pretty straight shot. So I uploaded this to Dream Studio and very quickly played around with adding. You can tell Dream Studio how much you want the image to be like the image you uploaded, and it can be very little or it can be a lot. So I played around with that slider. I played around using different prompts, different film styles, and putting the character in different places. One was an airport, one was a parking lot, one was New York City, and one was in a studio. And you can see some of this is my first go. This was the first day, pretty much the first day I was on the software playing with this image. And you can see a variety of people we got, some funny hands going on over here. But
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused.
Okay,
these
sure.
are images that you created with the one image you just showed us, the original image?
That's right.
Okay, gotcha.
That's right. So I uploaded that image into Dream Studio and generated, I generated a lot more, but these were 8 of the ones that I felt like were shockingly good. I was really surprised by how much these images would have been images I would have been commissioned to shoot, and it would have taken me days and days and days to shoot 8 different models in 8 different locations. And I did it in about an hour sitting at my computer. And again, there's not a lot of control. I think there's a lot of room for prompting to get more specific about what I'm looking for. But this didn't feel all that much different than walking around on the street and making pictures and just seeing what I would come up with, which was my initial process when I started making film, shooting. And so from here, I got very curious about what would happen if I uploaded other images that I had. I have almost 1 million images in my archive. And so I wanted to start seeing okay, well, what happens with all of these other portraits that I've shot? And what happens with prompting? And where can I get with things? And so I launched Women of Machine Learning. I was very surprised by how quickly I was able to find imagery that I felt like they were images that I made. I was surprised by how much the process of generating photographs and then editing the photographs it was a very similar process to street photography, where I walk around and just meet people and ask to photograph them, as well as watching them develop on the computer, which was very similar to watching a print develop in a developer when I was shooting film a very long time ago. I use all kinds of different prompts, and I put them in different locations. This was a woman at a rodeo and a woman on a ski slope. A woman on a street, another woman on a street. I found that.
And again, Leah, all of these are compositionally and sort of color similar to the image you uploaded, right?
Variations. I find what happens is I'll upload an image and I'll put it at about 50%, the middle of the range. And the images that are generated have a lot of similarities to the image I uploaded, similar to the first example I gave. They're not that different. Yeah. Then if I move the slider further and further away from that first image and keep regenerating, I start to get a much wider variety and still have pretty realistic results.
And it still looks like your work?
I think so. I think these images feel like images I would have made.
I'm sorry, I'm still having a hard time understanding, like with the images that you have on the screen now.
Yeah.
Are those both generated pieces? I mean, what did the original photo look like?
I could do a presentation with that. I don't actually remember which images I used for which photos. The images that I'm showing you are really, really different than the initial image that I uploaded. So I realized really early on, I don't really want to shoot the same images I've already shot. I want to see new characters coming up. So I don't actually know which images line up with which photos I uploaded because the final ones are so different from that initial one.
This is kind of based off of her portfolio of existing images that she sent to the server and said, analyze this. And
no, so this is not like Dream Booth. So what she's doing here, there's a thing you can do in Stable Diffusion called image to image. So she's uploading one image, and then she's saying this, she's putting in a prompt, and then sliding the slider. How close to the original do you want it or not?
Okay.
And then it's generating new people, basically.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Right.
That's right. That's right. I didn't hear the question.
It was just basic. He was asking, have you uploaded a whole body of work and now you're generating images? Right.
No.
You're doing the image to image thing. So the
That's
next step is for her to do the body of work.
That's right.
So what was the scale? Because you said 50% didn't really give you much change, and I'm curious because I've met, this is literally what I was asking about before you just jumped right into call, and I've messed with this myself a little bit as well. And I had very terrible results. I wasn't successful at all, and so I'm wondering what your scale was where you started to see success.
I keep not as scientific as I want it to be because I don't create that way, but I start about in the middle and then I'll move the slider a little bit more so it's less, right? So maybe down to 30% and then regenerate. But I still have that same image I started with, and then I'll move it down a little bit more and then regenerate. And then I'll play with different modifications, different prompts and modifiers to sort of move things in different directions. But then sometimes I do a lot around, I'm really interested in trying to get a diversity in the imagery. So I'll do a lot of, let's say I upload a photograph of a woman in a studio who is let's say a woman with white skin and dark hair. And I might say, I'll use that image as inspiration, but I'll say, okay, let's take a picture of let me see if I have an example of a woman from Mexico City who is cold, woman from Mexico City visiting New York wearing a coat, something like that. I don't put races in, I say where people are from, like what part of the world they live in. And that helps generate, I think, some very interesting faces. But I think it's interesting to play that off of the initial image that I put in. And then I'll start playing around with, the slider and where it goes and how far over and how far back.
Are you using photographic terms, or do you say a photograph of? Are you using
I say a photo.
Types?
I have found that lens types doesn't work and aperture doesn't work, even though I want it to. I find that cameras are really useful. DSLR, medium format, Hasselblad gave me some interesting results. Full frame Hasselblad. I find different lighting techniques work in really strange ways. Setting sun, it's pretty good with daytime. So midday sun, setting sun, lens flare, side light. It depending on where it is in the prompt field, it'll be more aggressive. I've played around with different, like National Geographic or 1950s makeup, like playing around with different ways that photography might have looked at different times, just to see what it picks up on and what it doesn't.
And I'm curious, what are your results with landscapes or anything that's not really like a portrait?
I haven't shot a ton of landscapes. I'm not that interested in shooting landscapes. I played around with, I'm trying to make flowers from flowers that don't, like flowers that don't exist from flowers that do. So I've played a bit with putting flowers in and then like trying to make a flower look like a different kind of plant. And I've had some interesting results with that. Not enough to feel that excited about it yet, but I haven't done a lot with landscape.
You had a question?
Is there like a prompting language, or is there like she's got like you had copy pasted someone else's prompts and applied it to your own image?
The question is there a prompting language? There's a whole craft of sort of prompt engineering or prompt crafting. If you go to the agenda, actually in the list in the Discord, there's a thing called a prompt book that we've got in there. It's a 95-page PowerPoint presentation that explains how it works. It's fascinating. It understands a lot.
Yeah.
Question. So
another question.
So these people are computerly generated. They're not real people. So then, say Calvin Klein can create models and they can become famous, but they actually don't exist.
Correct.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And that's like the whole idea here, right? The women of machine learning, right? These are all people that don't exist, but
that's right.
But are Leah's people in her style, right?
Yeah, and the idea is to try to make them look like my images would look, right? If I was running around on the street making photographs of people, which I have done, would they look similar to these images? And I think that's a journey that I'll be on for a while. What you just said about the Calvin Klein models is very, very important. And I think it's going to change the way we think about photography and imagery and modeling. The whole industry, I think, is going to shift for that exact reason. If we can get to a place where we could create a model that exists over and over and over again, so that person could then be standing on the street and they could live in this house and they can wear this shirt and that sort of thing.
Without aging, too.
Without aging.
Right. I wonder if you can train it. Like, can you train the person on the left and like, so it knows who that is? Because I have seen something like where it does, what do they call them? They call them puppets, I think, where you can say like, this is your thing. And now I want this thing. And it was a mid-journey thing. I could look for it, but I was like, I want this puppet, you know, because it could be a person, whatever, in this scene. And it's not perfect, but I wonder if you can figure that out. And I don't know if you saw my thing in Discord where I kept getting the same person over and over.
I know the modeling industry right now is developing 3D avatars of their models. That's exactly what they're doing. I think the biggest ethical question of all of this is going to be, how do you make sure that like the original model and the original photographer get a fair amount of compensation if those assets are used indefinitely forever in a million different AI generated ways? I think it's going to be like our society is not built in a way to ensure that the photographer and the model are the people who get the biggest chunk of that economic puzzle.
For my, I mean, I've watched, I mean, this is a really big, I mean, right now that's going on, not in AI, right? Photographers are fighting for usage rights and models are fighting to get, like, the fights that go on around photo shoots right now and usage and model rights and who gets paid, it's very interesting. And I think what needs to happen is that the more, the harder it is for a creative person, for other people to make their creative work, the more value it has and the more power they have in negotiating those rights. And so I think if creators take the initiative to learn these tools and to make imagery that only they can make, then they're going to have a lot more they're going to have a lot more power over negotiating that sort of thing. If the thing is that if an art director or creative director or a client can build the entire things themselves with AI, they're not even going through the model agency and they don't need a photographer. And so I think in the next year, it's going to be interesting to see who kind of ends up being able to make work that is rare, right?
Yeah.
How do you create rarity?
I don't think it goes away. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. You can go.
No, you go.
I just spoke. it's your turn.
Okay.
Popcorn.
I don't. So I've been talking about this a lot because I have a lot of friends and photographers, and I'm a creative director, right? And I don't think it goes away. Like, I'm not. I mean, I do my thing, right? But I'm never going to have time to sit down and do a photo shoot with AI, and my art directors are not going to have the time to sit down and do a photo shoot with AI. I'm going to have to hire somebody to sit down and do a photo shoot with AI. So whether that's a photographer or I'm sure digitechs are going to be learning that. Like somebody's, the job's not going, I don't think the job's going away. I think different people might be doing the job.
I agree.
If that makes sense.
Exactly. Exactly.
Leah, your skill in curation on this is really clear, right? So there's an eye for this that is part of the puzzle too, Kenny, to your point, right? Like I don't think I could do this even with AI, but Leah can. So yeah, and it's great. And to that point, Leah, I was kind of curious about the curation rate. Is it, you said something earlier, like it felt like doing a photo shoot. Is it similar to the kind of scale of photographs that you would normally have to work from, the kind of output amount that you're getting and curating from, or it just felt like the same process?
It's so much faster. I mean, I made in 1 week the amount of images that would have taken me a year walking around. So this would be similar to me to street photography, right? Which is sometimes when I don't have a lot of work, I just walk around and make pictures of people. I just stop people on the street and photograph them, or I'll play with lighting. It would take me a year, over a year, and a huge expense to shoot this variety of images. I have about 250 now that are in queue to go on my Instagram feed. It took me a week and a half. Wow. And so it just, the scale is so different. The team of people required are different. I mean, just what I'm able to do in 2 weeks it was shocking compared to.
And you're brand new to the tool, right?
Yeah.
This is,
right?
Yeah. This is 2 weeks brand new to the tool, not using the fancy tools, right?
That's right. I haven't even started making my own filtering and my own, data sets and all of that. This is just using what's available to me in Stable Diffusion. Yeah.
The other side of the rights thing I think is interesting. There was a news item, I think it was 2 months or so ago. Bruce Willis, oops, what happened? Something's wanting me to leave the site. Y'all still there? Bruce Willis has a disease where he is no longer going to be able to speak. He just sold his rights for his likeness for like $150 million for all of this. So he will be able to act in films in the future, probably at any age in his career, right? Because there's such a body of work that they can pull from. So they can build all these models on Bruce Willis. So I think the other side of, evil creators are going to steal my rights is, clever IP holders are going to say, hey, let's find a way to get paid when someone uses this likeness in the official way. So I think there's two sides of the creative coin here.
Agreed. I agree with everyone. I think we are talking about two sides of the same coin. And I think that's an important purpose for groups like this to exist, is for the creatives and the creators and the workers and the average people to get out ahead of AI created activities and make sure that we all get a cut of whatever happens.
I think we don't even know what's going to happen, and that's very exciting. And I remember when we switched from film to digital, digital changed everything. It changed the world of photography. It changed how we make photography. It changed how we share photography, how much more collaborative it is. But that's not what people were concerned about when the shift was. I felt like the fears and the anxieties didn't really line up with the world that it ended up becoming. And really incredible things happened and really scary things happened, just because that's what happens when technology changes. And I think the same thing will happen here, and we just don't know. I mean, digital was that way for me. I don't know. I'm just going to start playing, and I'm just going to start seeing what happens.
But it did create more jobs, I will say, because you have a digitech, right? I mean, I guess it took away film people doing the film. But so there's that thing. But like Kyle was saying, I have a friend who's working with a celebrity right now who's no longer alive, and he's working with their family to capture his voice. And I forget what program they're using. He just sent me his first takes. And it's amazing. So he is speaking, and it's the celebrity's voice. And I can't tell the difference.
Wow.
And so, but it, you know, the rights issues, the family is doing this. So, you know, people can use his voice in, you know, I guess voiceovers or animation or whatever. And they'll still get paid because they own, you know, they'll own the rights.
So
Crazy.
cool. It's so cool. And I think it's in like about 10 years ago, there was a lot of negotiations with contracts and magazines. I shot for magazines for 10 years before I started doing commercial work. And there was a lot of contractual language about, like, it used to be in magazines, you licensed your image for one-time use in a magazine when you shot the project, or that's what I would do. And then about 10 years ago, contracts started shifting to, we can use the data any way we want forever. And everybody was signing it, even though they still own the copyright, but now the magazine can use the data forever. And no one would have ever imagined that one of the uses would be included in a data set for artificial intelligence. Like, it's just, the thing about technology is we can't even imagine what IP, you know, IP is. So it's like, yeah, it's interesting. Right. Okay.
And I think your point too about the scale, like, you know, there's going to be all these copyright lawsuits, but how are you going to chase it down? A lot of this stuff is open source now, right? So there's going to be so much work created. It's like, who do you sue, right? You know, so I mean, there'll be lots of lawsuits, but
yeah. And how do you prove it, right? Like, how do you prove that how would I prove, even if an image kind of looked like mine, that somebody used Leah Fasten, you know, image like Leah Fasten in their prompt, right? Like, how would I prove that? You can't prove that. So it's like, how does that even get enforced? It seems hard to.
Well, and I don't know how true this is, but
enforced on the libraries, the training sets themselves. I think it's more likely the artists are going to go after Midjourney for the money that they're making on subscription fees, and it's going to turn into a situation where their training set can only be built by opt-in artists who then get some amount of royalty for participating. That's what I hope it turns into. I want everyone to get paid for every subscription that uses their work, but I don't know. Fingers crossed. Hopefully.
I had the same thing as, like, I could see them. I don't think, and I put that article in the feed, but I don't think me saying, you know, Mickey Mouse in the style of Shepard Fairey, I don't think they're going to come after me, because I might not be making money, but Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, all the, you know, I mean, you know, they're all making money off the subscription fees. And I remember when my mom worked at a lot, she was a legal secretary, and they would, Peanuts was their, you know, Charles Schultz Peanuts, the characters was their client, and they would go to a bakery that was making Peanuts cakes that didn't have the license, and they'd buy a Snoopy cake, and then they'd give them a cease and desist. And they'd be like, just don't do this anymore. They're not going to sue them. It's a, you know, it's a little bakery, but they're like, you can't do, and it's no different. And they're making a lot more money than this little bakery.
Right.
Which
That's
actually,
right. Like
there's like a part of trademark and copyright law that a trademark holder must protect and enforce their trademark, or they will lose it. They have to deliver a cease and desist. That doesn't mean they have to sue everyone, but they have to pursue instances of infringement and take action against them, or they will lose their IP. So, like,
I think you mentioned that in the Discord or something. Yeah, you're right.
I think they're going to go after the people who are actually making money off of it. I think maybe if some creators hit it big on, you know, something that looks like a Peanuts character or a Disney character, maybe then they'll go after that creator. But in the meantime, they're going to go after the subscription moneymakers.
Yeah, great. All right. Well,
and there's the other thing. If I can figure out how to make Charlie Brown without putting Charlie Brown in there, I could put, like, big round-headed kid with, you know, no neck. Like, if I can do that and prove that like I created that without using Charlie Brown, I think that's probably, you know, fair game, like me drawing it, right? But
as long as the training set does not actually include Peanuts, I would agree.
Yeah, so we only have a couple more minutes of the meeting, and maybe we could take this discussion to Discord or something.
Yeah, actually. That's a perfect segue, Ken. Thanks. So Leah, first, thank you so much. Really awesome. Like, I loved that the questions that came up were like, wait, were these AI generated or not? It was like,
Yeah.
yeah. It was like, oh crap.
Yeah, it's cool. Awesome. Yeah.
No, really, really awesome. And I think, your point about the creative point of view is everything. And so whether you're a creative now or not, we've all got access to these creative tools. So really thinking about what's your style, you'll find it. Like HT, you might not be able to do what Leah can do, but you might geek out on, I don't know, squirrel pictures. And, you've got the best squirrel pictures. Right?
No, actually, this is why I want to get going, because I do have some ideas, right? And then they're super different. But
yeah, exactly.
It's very cool when you're first getting started to be able to like take weird ideas in your head and see them just immediately realized in front of you. And it takes a while to figure out your sense of style, but as you keep generating images, you will.
Yeah, super.
And I think it's like any art practice, that sometimes the mistakes are the things that will lead you to the next thing, and to really pay attention to those and to embrace them. And I think one of the things I think's been happening a lot with a lot of the work I see when I scroll through Midjourney is things kind of start to look like other things. And so I think there's a lot of language around making perfect images. And I like to see what happens when things aren't quite so perfect too. Like what happens when, and that's where I think our personalities and who we are, whatever medium we're using. I mean, that happens in film photography or drawing or painting. It's when we let those mistakes happen. I think we can start to find ourselves there.
Yeah. And I talk about the spectrum too. Some people are putting like I did with my thing, what's his name? David Harbour eating a lollipop, right? And that's all they're putting in there, right? So those will all look like that. But it's like some people go to a strip mall and do paint a pot, and that's awesome because they're being creative. And I think those are the same thing. And then some people, have a studio and they paint for days. And I think there's a spectrum of AI in that. And I don't think they're both great. Because they're both being creative.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the level of creative output is at a different level, which is why I think everyone's losing their mind, right? But that's also the exciting thing. So a couple of things. Let's wrap this up. I want to give you a chance, Leah, to say yours. Here's a couple of thoughts that I have. We want this to be a group where we can all explore this stuff in a hands-on way. Also, if you come across people's work that you really like, invite them to join the group, right? We want people in here that are doing interesting stuff. If you find something that rises above the noise, Kenny, I didn't see your characters until after I asked you to join this. And when I saw them, they're absolutely amazing because they have this really unique thing, as does Leah's work. So do that. The other thing I want to strongly encourage is please join the Discord. I almost want to think of these meetings as these are just the kind of check-ins to remind us what we're up to and get inspired. But the real work we can do in the Discord, helping one another and sharing work we've done, like that's where this thing's really going to come to life. So I just strongly encourage that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, to Leah, for the final words.
I wanted to, again, tell everyone to join Discord. There's a lot happening there. I think it'd be fun to start to put together maybe some groups where we can work together on things, or just sort of spontaneous, hey, I'm working on this, who wants to do some front crafting. Doesn't even have to be organized, can just happen. And I think that was probably what I wanted to say. I think we could talk a little bit too in Discord about other directions you might like to see, or if you have ideas about what else you'd like to see in these meetings. I think the community is as much yours as anything else. So thank you for coming.
Perfect. Yeah, this is our second meeting, so thank you all for coming on Christmas week, no less, and wearing your fancy hats. Love it. Thanks, everybody. See you on Discord, and we'll see you January 3rd for the next meeting.
Okay. Happy holidays, everyone.
Holidays.
Bye.
Nice.
The gavel.
Let me turn this off. Just close the meeting.